You're listening to the Friends Talking Nerdy Podcast Network.
Friends Talking Nerdy. If your friends are nerdy and you are nerdy too, I want to talk to you. Friends Talking Nerdy.
I've been saying this for 5 years. Welcome to Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim Jousmont, or as the Reverend wants to call me now, Tim the Nerd. And joining me all the way in Portland, Maine, we have Your Holiness, the Reverend Tracy. How you doing?
Hello, everybody. I have been saying it for not near as long, but I was in the background of the creation of the show. I know Tim has been awesomely open about that. And yes, see, it's kind of like how when people get baptized, they take a Christian name. I think I have fully started to convert Tim. So his new reborn, the Reverend name is Tim the Nerd. I don't know. I kind of like how some of that like flowed together as kind of a funny ha-ha. So it kind of started as a joke in my head. But I don't know. Maybe we could see if people like Tim the Nerd as much as, you know, Tim Jasna. But yeah, I'm doing good this week. I'm getting over the ragweed pollen that attacked all of Portland, Maine last week and had everybody kind of grumpy and stuff. So guys, I will go ahead and open up and say it. I am going to do my best to hit my mute button, but if you catch any little coughs and stuff from me, I don't have COVID again. I'm just working out what was just shit allergy attack that really it took me and the Mr. Reverend down a little bit, me a little bit more than him, but it was really shitty those few days. But we finally got rain and it washed the pollen away. So we're doing much better now on pollen counts.
That is good, at least. Yeah, I mean, I remember my old apartment, which you visited before, had in the summer had great like a great breeze with how it was positioned. You know, like the breeze would come through. So even during the hottest times of summer, as long as I had a fan, it was really cool. But one drawback was that right outside the window was a tree, and just pollen every day would be coming through that window, and I'd just be coming to work like all snorty and all that stuff. It wasn't
my
fun.
God. Yeah, I know the trees that shit pollen all over your car, like especially there in Portland, Oregon and stuff. I mean, we're really grateful that the rain finally came because yesterday was actually the Mr. Reverend's birthday.
Yay.
And yeah, it was kind of funny though, because the one time I didn't bring an umbrella is the one time I'm like, hey, instead of me cooking when I get home, why don't I pick up takeout from I think it's the only fully vegan restaurant in Portland, Maine. So, I mean, obviously we love it then, and they're really creative and it's really delicious food for anybody that happens to be in this area that's curious. It's called Copper Branch, and I think the only other location is like up in Canada. So, of course, I'm taking the bus because my car's still in the shop, and that's when it starts raining. I was so glad though, because it was more of the Portland, Oregon, just that constant drizzle, you know what I mean? Like where it mists, it's the whole thing. Like, you know, you're a Portland, Oregon localer when you stop taking an umbrella when it rains. You just need a hoodie because it's just kind of this stupid mist. In Maine, it's a little bit more serious when it rains here, and it just comes down like a flood. But fortunately, it waited until after the Mr. Reverend and I were home, so it wasn't too crazy. And then it was almost like a fun birthday gift for him because he and I actually both really love rain, especially when it comes down like that. So,
I mean, I love the rain myself, except for the rain that it like rains so hard it immediately goes through like all of your clothes, like instantly.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can actually go find the throwback video on this when I first moved to Maine and discovered how different the rain pattern is here. Because, you know, I'm used to like, oh, there's clouds in the distance. It's fine. It'll drizzle for a little while. So I'd like walk to drop something off. Because here they still have like those little post office drop boxes like in random places. Mm-hmm. Like they're not all just in front of businesses, which is what I kind of got used to in Portland, Oregon. Like they're legit just in random spots. Like you can walk and drop off mail. And I was like, yeah, sure. I'll go take this letter from my mother-in-law and go drop it. And I'll be back well before that hits. And like, it just starts coming down. And I was just laughing so hard. I just like whipped out my camera my phone was like, well, when it rains, it pours. It's just like I am being completely drenched. So yeah, kind of different here in that sense. But I'm just glad that it finally rained and knocked down some of this freaking pollen.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I mean, the weather here has been a little on the warm side, but I've also been hanging out mostly inside doing wrapping up a summer semester for school. So tons of air conditioning and bad iced coffee.
My coffee just got cold naturally. See?
I love the cold brew. I love cold brews. Like, they taste horrible. And when I drink them, I don't put any sweetener in them because, like, when I want to wake up, I want to wake up. You know, to me, coffee is not a drink you drink because you like it. You drink it for a reason to wake up. And to me, the best way to wake up is like essentially a kick in the face. And that's what cold brew does.
Well, that's just like your opinion, man. Because I actually really love coffee. It's really funny. Like, I love coffee flavored ice cream, coffee, like, just because, like, I'll drink decaf because I try not to do like too much caffeine, like, in general anyway, because it's not good for like sleep cycles and stuff. And when you're a person that has anxiety, you should be careful on your coffee intake, like, all joking aside. So I try to be very aware of that, but I fucking love coffee. Like, even if it's like a cafe, like, there's a few places that I like to eat at, and I don't really care for their coffee. Like, it's not the best coffee, but because I'm having breakfast, for example, I need it. Like, it just goes with it in my head. So, but coffee ice cream is just absolutely one of my favorites.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I mean, I've been drinking coffee for years. It's not about not liking coffee in a sense, but I don't drink it for the taste myself, you know. So, like, going to like a coffee shop or something like that, just, it seems silly to, because like when I used to go to Starbucks, for instance, I would get the caramel venti frappuccino, which is just essentially a coffee milkshake. That's all it is.
Oh, God. My coffee drink of choice when I was like, nope, I need to like slam caffeine because, you know, I was younger then, was that Mean Bean by Monster. And now I used to have to pace myself and be like, tea, you're only allowed 2 max, because any more than that much caffeine in a day and you're going to go crazy and just be like shaking at your desk. But like, I'd have to fight myself and pace it. And now it's like, I don't even think I could drink one of those if I tried. Like, between the sugar and the I think it's almost like a heavy cream. Like, it was really sweet, but it was like a popping open a milkshake.
Yeah. Which, you know, again, for me, if you're gonna have something, I like simple stuff. You know, just pour coffee in a glass and I'm cool.
Yeah, maybe when you come visit, there's like some places here that do a decent nitro cold brew.
I'll have to give that a try. But before we dive into things, we do want to talk about Fearlandia for a moment.
Yes, we are hiring. I'm probably going to be bringing this up a lot because it's a really fun opportunity. I even wanted to kind of go today, you know, because I've talked about it in general, like for our acting people, if you have acting experience or background or interest, it's a good thing. Something I actually wanted to put a little bit of spin on it. If you're in the Portland, Oregon area, I have found that it is actually a really fun, almost therapeutic setting. Some of my early getting into it, I was nervous. I don't like haunted houses, right? Like, the big joke is I'm the casting director that refuses to go through other haunts. And it actually, I watch other casting directors when I'm at like conferences or at these little meetups go, what? Well, that's because the Reverend Tracy has made it no mystery that I deal with anxiety. I deal with depression. I have CPTSD. It's not technically diagnosed yet, but I like know what I have. It makes sense. I've read the DSM on it and other like, you know, things like that. So, I mean, obviously a lot of people get surprised when I say that I work in haunted house industry, and I have worked and coached other people who have anxiety or depression or even PTSD. And a lot of people find it oddly empowering to be in that position of power And what's great is you don't have to feel guilty about being in that place of power, because the dynamic is literally that people want to come in and get scared. So that being said, we also have what I call behind the wall acting. So you're a little bit separated from people. So if you're concerned about that at all, it's a lot of fun. It's a big family environment. So if that is something that interests you on that level, we are looking for all kinds. And big one here, we are even looking for somebody who is interested in makeup and SFX. That one is going to require a little bit more background in it. And that doesn't have to be a professional background. If you've done it for fun and taken photos, please feel free to apply. And if you want, the easiest website to get to is fearlandia.com. So a lot like Portlandia, just replace port with fear, FEARLANDIA.com. And that will actually take you through. You can apply through there. If you want to apply through Facebook, which is pretty easy to do, you can click right there on the Facebook link on the actual website. It'll take you there. There's a job posting, and that's actually going to go pretty much directly to me at that point. I didn't leave a lot of room for commentary. How did you hear from us or anything? But once I reach out to you, please feel free to say that you're a friend of the show. I mean, I can't promise any level of preferential treatment, but I would like to know if you guys hear from here and end up coming through.
Yeah, and as a consumer from Fearlandia, I can tell you the experience is definitely going to be fun for you. And as someone who has worked with the Reverend Tracy for a long time now, I can tell you that you're going to have a good experience working with someone that understands what the creative aspect is of the haunt and really embraces it and encourages people to, break out of their shell in a way that feels comfortable for them, because you've done it for me a lot.
Well, and even in the haunt, there was one person that back when I was, I will say just a lead, because I was one of the lead monsters. I progressed pretty quickly into that because the front room is no joke. Back when it was those years before I took on the casting direction role, they just kind of considered her a warm body. And it's not to be offensive, because you do kind of need people who can pull triggers, who could just, not go boo literally, but kind of to that skill level. And I worked with her one season. And the owners, both on separate occasions, pulled me to the side and said, "What did you do with her?" And I was like, I don't know how to explain it. I just kind of worked with her and, worked with her confidence and put her in spots that I just kind of felt her, her confidence come out. And now she is like one of our top actors. Nice. So total transformation. You guys can do this. It's super fun. Even if you just come check it out, I highly recommend it. So again, fearlandia.com.
Yes, and for folks that are listening, that information is in the show description. It's just a matter of one tap of your finger on either your phone screen or your tablet screen, and it will bring you directly to the website to submit that application. And if you do it, you're going to have a fun time.
Yes. So it's a great time. These people are like my family. So it's not going to be one of those environments that I think is kind of bad. I know there are some haunts that don't have necessarily the best environment amongst their actors. That is not something we groom with Fearlandia. They're pretty much the Fear fam, and that's what I call them, and that's why I go back and visit.
Nice. Now, before we dive into our main event for this week, we do want to touch upon a question that you floated out to our audience via social media about last week's episode. Yeah,
we are. I know we've made no secret of it. At the front of this show, we do want you guys to feel like you can be involved, right? So I thought, what better way to get involvement than to make it a meme, right? Because you can ask questions all you want in the text of the post, but ultimately at the end of the day, I'm guilty of it. I don't read it all the time. Mm-hmm. So we've kind of changed things up. Openly put out there, hey guys, we want your response. And we even got some responses from non-listeners that came through, and those were really interesting. And then of course some fans of the show, personal friends also chimed in. So we have stuff to share, and that's such awesome news for us.
Indeed, indeed. Like the first person here, and it's not going to be a long list. We didn't get like 100 people submitting things, so don't worry about that. But it's from Instagram. Their tag is Intentional Mind. Her name is Rebecca Pay. She's an ICF certified personal development strategist, partnering with clients on motivation, stress regulation, relationship growth, and self leadership. So, with titles like that, the fact that, she took the time to, answer the question, I definitely appreciate that. I want to put that out there first of all. But her comment was this: love this question. I don't love the idea of leagues concerning partners' looks or income. I think it creates an overemphasis on those ideals. People fall in love for so many reasons, and there's no need to generate more insecurity around it, which, right on. I mean, like, you do find, the older I get, I do find that, yeah, you do kind of take yourself out of potentially dating other people because they may have a little bit more money than you, or they may be a little bit more successful than you. And especially too, if you're a guy, I mean, there's the whole stigma of guys shouldn't be in relationships with women that make more money than them. That makes them less of a man. Ooh,
And I know we talked about that in the last episode. That's something that I love about the Mr. Reverend and I, is we have totally switched on those dynamics. When we met, I was the money-making powerhouse. The joke was I was Shug's sugar mama because, I wanted to go do things. I mentioned that. I wanted to do things, so I paid for it. And I love that that's actually flipped back now, because I feel like the respect stayed the same. You know what I mean? I don't feel like that actually shook our relationship to its core or anything like that. So, yeah, I highly recommend getting rid of the league mentality, because just meet people. You're going to find and even I know we're reviewing it and it hasn't released yet, but our current season of TNT review where we're talking about human resources. There's going to be a point where we talk about the woman that's just had a baby and her partner. Like, I kind of feel like there's a little bit of that league difference, right? Like, he doesn't have the ambitious nature that she does, but it works for them ultimately. So I love this being pointed out in a way more intelligent way than I could have said it. So thank you so much, Rebecca Payne, Intentional Mind on Instagram. So if anybody wants to follow that, you can probably find them. I guarantee I'm going to on my There's Life After Trauma. I'm actually going to probably do that right after the show recording is done, because that's the kind of stuff I like to follow and put into my brain, is emotional maturity in my feed.
Indeed. We also got another response from a friend of the show. Why don't you read that one?
Yes, this is actually also a personal friend of mine. We often joke that we are alternate reality spouses. It was something that didn't work out in this reality, but we've stayed really good friends. And for a long time, he was my imaginary friend because we had never met in person. This is John Nelson, friend of the show. He actually picked his own 5, so I'm just going to go ahead and go through them. Number 1, he agrees, waiting for guys to make the first move. And this is coming from another man. And John, I know, is like one of the sweetest guys ever. So I think he would be the type to not make a move, to not accidentally pressure somebody. And that's something that I've met a lot of in dudes. Number 2, holding one-sided conversations or consistently interrupting each other. That's true. And I know we talked about that a little bit, that's a little bit of a human nature thing. Yep, that's hard to do. And I think we're going to end up adopting that nose tapping thing that I brought up, because it's not a bad idea. Number 3, the idea one has to pay exclusively for the dates. That's going into, Tim the nerd and his cheap Dutchman attitude. Playing hard to get, sending mixed signals. I mean, we talked about that a lot. And then not a dating red flag, but telling people to stop looking and someone will come. And to me, that was kind of the one that I almost wanted to talk about for a second, just because, oh my God, such a valid point. No offense, friends who really think that this is doing well. Just be aware that this, in a small way, whether intentional or not, can be very invalidating to somebody's concerns, right? You're literally saying, don't worry about that, stop acting, when they have a very valid concern about, dating and relationships and wanting to be in one. So I understand it's not necessarily bad advice or ill intended advice, but it can be kind of invalidating to your friends that you know are kind of seeking that partnership. So just be careful when you say those things to somebody that you know is struggling and feeling very frustrated with our toxic dating culture.
Yeah. I mean, the best thing you can do, honestly, for somebody that is depressed about something like this is, like, less talk about dating and more getting that person out of the house to do something, to have some fun, get them understanding life. Because, the idea of number 5 here of telling somebody to stop looking it's on its surface, it's not wrong. But it's also something you don't need to tell people,
Yeah. To me, it's one of those just statements, right? And anytime you get tempted to use a just statement with somebody, I would take a pause and self-reflect on that just feeling, because it's not just that easy to the person that you're talking to, obviously, or they wouldn't be frustrated about it. So really, those just statements are kind of those invalidating statements that you should watch and make sure that you try not to say.
Indeed. So we would love to thank Rebecca and John once again for taking time out of their day to send us their thoughts on this question. And because of how successful this was, I mean, we're definitely going to be trying to do more of this going forward. So if there is anything going forward that you feel like you want to make a comment about, if there's something that we missed, if there's just something that you feel is important for the Friends Talking Nerdy audience to know, if you go into the show description, you can click the button that says leave us a message, and you can do that. If we get a voice message, if it's appropriate, we will play it at the top of the show and then comment on it. And also too, like with Rebecca, I have no problem, going, doing a little extra in terms of letting people know what she does, so putting a link. We would love to promote, you scratch our backs, we'll scratch yours.
And hey, you may as well do it now, because who knows, maybe one day we will get hundreds of comments and you can be like, wow, I remember when they were small and I was able to leave a voicemail every week. So go for it. Give us attention, I guess is what I'm saying.
And I hope we do have somebody in the audience that talks just like that.
Oh God, please do. Give me your best. I mean, really, I was channeling my inner McGucket there from Gravity Falls, but
All right, let's dive into the main event this week, and it's something that definitely affects us both and affects a lot of people that we know. It is about student debt. Word is this week that President Biden will be coming out with some sort of official comment about student loan debt potentially getting canceled in some way or something that could help out people that have thousands of dollars in student loan debt. And so what we wanted to do was go to the old Pro-Con website and discuss this out, because again, it's something that, directly affects both you and I and a lot of the people that we know.
Oh, exactly. And there have been a lot of announcements lately. There's been a lot of teasing of this idea on student loan debt forgiveness. And there right now isn't actually anything being talked about in regards to full forgiveness, right? That's not anything that seems to be on the table, and it's even understandable because we are coming up on election cycles, and if Biden wants any of Team Red to vote for him, there's no way he's going to get that passed. And plus, because of how our politics work, there's no way that that's going to get passed. But right now, I think what's on the chopping block is up to $10,000 in forgiveness for each borrower. And then I know one thing they've talked about, which will come up in here, is restructuring how some of the repayment plans even work, which is really kind of great. I know one thing that's being floated is they're thinking about extending the moratorium, which is interesting because I don't have it in front of me for today, but something I had scrolled across at one point was saying, with the money that we've lost on the moratorium at this point, we could have forgiven a lot of the debt and it not be costing as much as the moratorium at this point. But, I like I said, I didn't pull that one up. But I did want to go into, of course, there's a pro-con article. So I am ready to be educated on the pros and the cons on this because, it directly affects me. I went to a private Christian university, which was not cheap. And there was even some stuff that got advised to me from the college financial advisor that put me in a bigger hole. And I want to talk about those things. So I'm really excited to get into these.
All right, let's do it. Let's dive into the first pro and con. What is it?
So pro number 1, student loan debt is slowing the national economy. Forgiveness would boost the economy, benefiting everybody. Student loan debt slows new business growth and quashes consumer spending. A Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia study found, quote, a significant and economically meaningful negative correlation, end quote, between student loan debt and the falling rate of new small businesses. Student loan debt can make getting a business or any other loan in that fact, oh yes, that is a total thing, any other loan difficult, including home loans, meaning people with student loan debt are less likely to be able to open their own businesses. And the effects snowball from there. Fewer small businesses means fewer jobs and less economic output and consumer spending, which in turn means lower national income and slow economic growth for the country. As William Forrester, Vice President, Senior Credit Officer in Moody's Sovereign Risk Group, explained, quote, U.S. real GDP could be boosted on average by $86 billion to $108 billion per year. And that's quite a bit. That's if you had total loan forgiveness. Though Foster stated total forgiveness isn't necessary to see a positive impact. When everyone can't participate in the economy, the whole economy suffers. And yeah, like I feel this one big time because the Mr. Reverend and I were actually looking in to a home loan, even though he has awesome like VA benefits, which, you know, they have their own home loan, their own small business loans and things like that. It was recommended to remove me from the application, even though I do have an income. Because of my student loan debt, I was bringing down our buying ability.
Wow.
So that legit has already played out for me. It can affect all sorts of stuff. It can even affect your ability to get certain jobs. Like I was so shocked. I once upon a time applied to work for a bank, and they legitimately told me that my debt to income ratio, largely because of my student loan debt piece, affected their ability to hire me. So this is actually causing a lot of, I mean, granted, not everybody tries to work for a bank, and in a weird way, I guess I get it, but I don't. Like, I don't know if they just think you're more likely to steal or why, like what that rationale was, but it was really kind of a really kick in the gut to like be told, no, you can't have this job because you did the thing that you got talked into doing, which I'm going to go into in con number 1.
Yeah, and I mean the first pro here just it makes total sense. It does. Like it. I mean the numbers. It is clear that, you know, when you straddle people at young ages with insurmountable debt, they're not going to have money to go off and do stuff. And we're already looking at like lower birth rates because people don't have the money to, pay, for themselves, much less another human being. You have, the home ownership being down tremendously. We have a massive, which was worsened by the pandemic, a massive shift in income. Like regular people ended up losing about $3 billion to the pandemic, but the richest people in the world ended up taking all of that and then some on top of that. Like education is an investment for society. It is. And the more we invest in that and the more we make it easier for people to get a good education, the better off this country is going to be. Because as mentioned here, we have, for people that are able to successfully get through college, and if they didn't have the loans, they'd be starting up businesses. Think about how many entrepreneurial opportunities wouldn't have come to pass in the past because of student loan debt. What are we missing out on now because somebody just happens to have a little extra student loan debt? And I think of my sister too, because she went to a private Christian college as well, accrued $300,000 or so in student debt, only to be told that women in her denomination wouldn't have positions of power in the church. So,
yep. I think I mentioned before on the show, they had the same thing at my alma mater. They basically called it the MRS degree. You're basically studying to be the youth pastor's wife. That's the way that they view it. That's how they've justified that education for women when they've traditionally not allowed women to be in speaking places of power. You can also lead women's groups. You're allowed to talk to other ladies. But yeah, like if you want less McDonald's, if you want less Amazon, if you want more mom and pop businesses, this is going to be one of those routes to get that. Right? So it does seem very beneficial for everybody. So to that hot little talking point that millennials aren't buying houses because we need our Starbucks, shut the fuck up with that. I am so tired of that old fucking narrative that has like no basis in reality. When the fact of the matter is we are being targeted right outside of high school. We are being marketed to right outside of high school.
And the people that usually are giving that argument are usually like our parents' age. And they're like, well, back in my day, I was able to do this, this, and this. Why can't you do it? Well, let's see. Wages are stuck. They've been stuck at a certain level here for at least a decade, you know, and like houses don't cost like $20,000 to purchase anymore. I mean, even apartments. Like I looked at my old studio apartment in Grand Rapids. My first apartment that was $250 a month, it's now about $1,200 a month, and that place was a shithole. You know, it wasn't worth $250.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. And it even goes back to they're trying their best to base it on their experience, but the fact of the matter is, the experiences are not the same. They're just simply not the same. So, yeah, I think going into con number 1 here. Student loan forgiveness is an abuse of the loan system. People must be held responsible for their personal economic choices. And if you can't tell that I find this con number 1 to be absolute horseshit by the inflection in my tone, I'm going to point it out now before I read their fucking paragraph. So a 2020 survey found that 46% of Americans believe, so notice that this is a poll on what Americans believe. Student loan forgiveness is unfair to those who have paid off their loans, and 39% believe it's unfair to those without loans. Matthew Noyes, columnist at Loan Conservative, who noted the sacrifices he had to make to pay off his $27,000 in student loans, explained, taking out a loan is a choice, and personal responsibility shouldn't be supplanted by taxpayer bailouts. Canceling student loans means penalizing people like me for honoring my word and repaying the debt I chose to accept. Noyes states that the forgiveness debate is steeped in the idea that, quote, people are entitled to a college education and other people's hard work. It codifies in policy the idea that adults are not responsible for their own actions. Can't wait to get onto that sentence there here in a second. Talking about taking on debt. In a free society, I am not entitled to a college education, and neither is anyone else. Further, less than 20% of American adults have student loan debt. Is it fair to offer relief to people who overstretch their financial capabilities to go to college and not those whose student loan debt but who may still struggle financially? My biggest fucking problem with this con is it is essentially blaming kids for being viewed as targets by a system that makes money off of them not being able to fully understand what it is they're signing up for. The simple fact is the people they're talking about that, quote, must be held accountable were still essentially and mentally children being talked into making a choice that benefits the predator more than the child. And so for this, I did want to make sure I brain checked myself. So, I come from a studying psychology background, so I'm a little bit more versed in some of the brain development. So this is actually an article from Stanford about understanding the teen brain. We'll include this because it's something we're quoting. So so I'm just going to read their little brief on this, right? And this has nothing to do with student loan debt. This is legit just talking about our brain development as humans. It doesn't matter how smart teens are or how well they scored on the SAT or ACT. Good judgment isn't something they can excel in, at least not yet. The rational part of a teen's brain, which really you should just say human's brain at this point, isn't fully developed and won't be until age 25 or so. In fact, recent research has found that adult and teen brains work completely differently. Adults think with the prefrontal cortex, the brain's rational part. This is the part of the brain that responds to situations with good judgment and an awareness of long-term consequences. Teens process information with the amygdala. This is the emotional part. And I think the reason this is a go-to argument against forgiveness is classic projection when you look at it this way, right? The fact is, talking a child, again, a mental child, just because we decided 18, boom, you're an adult, actually doesn't mean shit or dick of what's actually going on in our development, our physical development. So this is a physical development thing that we're talking about here. But basically, you're talking a child into an agreement that their brain literally does not have the full ability to comprehend. And this is the actual irresponsible action. And forgiveness would mean they would have to pay the consequences for their predatory action, which is something they simply don't want to do. They do not want to be held responsible for this. So I wanted to rephrase this con to make it a little bit more obvious, the projection here, right? Student loans are an abuse of high school graduates. Servicers must be held responsible for the economic damage caused by their predatory advances towards teens. And think about that age. By 25, most of us are out of fucking college at that point. So they've actually managed to keep us in this system during the ages that they can still mostly take advantage of the fact that our brain has not developed to the point where we're going to go, wait, no. And by the way, I'm sorry, $27,000 in debt. I don't even think that's the actual average of debt. But granted, I know I went to a private university. Mine is way more than that. Or at least like at the starting point, like what I had accrued. So I don't know if there's a major age difference in here. But either way, I absolutely hated this con. But at least they were really clear that this is a poll of American opinion. And a guy that writes for a conservative paper blog source, you know what I mean? So, I mean, obviously it's going to be a lot of that bias. There's not a lot of studies quoted in here. So to me, this is one of the easier cons to kind of pick apart. Like even just on a physical development level, when you break it down and compare those things, this is just a company that has found a way to make victims. And they don't care because they are getting money off of it.
And what I don't like about this argument, too, is that the argument that he's giving is basically he's comparing a college education to taking out a loan to get a new Lamborghini. Those are two separate things, because at the end of a college experience, if you are successful in terms of getting that degree and getting that job, you're going to be in a higher tax bracket. You know, again, that is what education ideally is supposed to do. It's supposed to elevate you so you can have a better position. And guess what? A lot of jobs these days are requiring that extra bit of a college education, you know, stuff that didn't necessarily in the past have that. And it's like the same argument, I guess, for people that, you know, have excess, you know, like medical debt as well. You know, it's like, are you going to yell at them for getting cancer? Are you going to yell at a woman who maybe didn't have insurance but got pregnant and had to have like an emergency C-section or something like that because she didn't have the cash to pay for that? Fuck you.
Yeah, I'd shared with you kind of this post that I had found just as we were spinning up to this conversation. It's from Existential Comics, and I think it makes a valid point on this whole like entitlement thing that this person is saying. So they say the wealthy elite will fight tooth and nail against free college for two reasons. Number one, it will be harder to fill the ranks of military with poor people if college is free. Yep. Which is true, because I tried to go the military route to avoid the debt. But even then, you know, I still got eventually sucked in because I got rejected by that. And then number two, starting off workers with enormous debt is the greatest innovation that capitalism ever came up with. And then I also loved there were some comments where people kind of turned it into 5 points. So number 3, higher educated folks tend to have a better understanding of their self-worth, reducing how much the rich can exploit them. Number 4, higher education also fosters innovation and entrepreneurship, leading to more small companies, more competition, and even smaller exploitable workforce. And number 5, the class gate to higher education will be open, and their kids will finally be truly judged based on their academic merit rather than the fact that they could afford to attend in the first place. So there's also just some bonus reasons as to why I feel like people want to make this as a you're making irresponsible decisions argument. I don't think when it comes down to it, you're not special in the 1% when you can invite more people to get into the 1% club, right? So if people have the ability because they really want to be, what are the high paying jobs, right? Doctor, lawyer, and those also tend to require even more education than just a 4-year fucking degree. I'm sorry, there's no doctors out there working with a bachelor's degree, guys. There's no lawyers with just a bachelor's degree. And even then, there's continuing education that you have to be able to afford to do those jobs that gets you up in those ranks. So yeah, I can totally see where people would be totally threatened. And then, of course, people like that own McDonald's and basically makes money off of every franchise that opens. They don't want mom and pop shops. Starbucks falls under that too. They don't want mom and pop's coffee shops, which, by the way, even though they're way better in quality than any Starbucks I've ever been to, even the smallest ones have been better. So I don't know. To me, it just seems like this is just one of the sillier cons. It's got no real backing to it other than just opinion and trying to shame children for being successfully gotten by a predator.
And it aims at the heart of like the big problem in America today, selfishness. You know, if you tell people that, you know, oh, this person's it's like that political cartoon of Rupert Murdoch having like a bunch of food on his plate. And then they have a white guy and a black guy on either side of him. The white guy had like one piece of food and the black guy didn't. And you had Rupert Murdoch talking to the white guy saying, you know, that guy wants your thing, right? That's what we're looking at here, unfortunately. And like, why don't people really see the benefit of what education does? It's like the people that badmouth when the government like gives money to like road projects or something like that. It's not giving money to somebody so they can pocket it. It's an investment. It's about rebuild. It's meant to, like, if they're like rebuilding a bridge or something like that, that's going to bring jobs. That's going to improve the roadways. That's going to help that area out by doing that. It's not a case of just throwing money away. I mean, if it was people being irresponsible, by all means, irresponsible people should suffer the consequences of their actions. But a 17-year-old being conned into signing a long-term loan agreement, you know, when if they walked into a car dealership, they would not be able to do that. The same thing. It speaks for itself. This is ridiculous.
Oh, absolutely. This is just one of those things that it drove me nuts when I read it. It's obviously dripping in bias from a pro-capitalism view. And I don't even think it bothered to hide it.
No. I mean, the rich will do anything they can to protect their interest. Right. Nothing more, nothing less. So.
Yes, because I'm sorry, but the person who's out there that can cure cancer, I don't think them being able to afford it should stop them from pursuing a passion that means they can cure cancer and stuff like that, right? And that's the fact of the matter is we've got that going on. Whether we like it or not, there are people out there that very well could be contributing in a much bigger way to society, but can't because they can't take on the debt like this, or they even got denied to be able to take on the debt like this. Yeah, I know I had to have my parents sign a parent loan thing to be able to make up the difference in what I needed for my college education and what I had. And of course, like, my parents didn't give a rip because they're like, they're not going to come after me for it. They're going to come after her. I'm going to be dead at some point. Like,
how nice.
Like, really, what does it do when a parent signs that guarantee? I don't know. To me, the parent loan thing was like one of those weird things at one point that I didn't unpack until much later.
Well, I mean, with my parents' credit scores, I was lucky I didn't have to worry about that. They weren't the best. But so should we dive into pro and con number 2 here?
Yes, go for it.
All right. Pro number 2, student loan debt has disproportionately hurt Black students. Forgiveness could help rectify racial inequality. Black college students borrow more than their white counterparts due to family income, generational wealth, parental education, and the types of colleges attended. According to Judith Scott Clayton, PhD, senior research scholar with the Community College Research Center at Columbia University, interest rates in graduate school loans leave Black graduates with twice as much debt as white graduates, almost $53,000 4 years after graduation. Scott Clayton also noted Black graduates default on student loans at a rate of 21%, while white graduates default at 4%. The disparity, she explains, is the result of most Black students who default having attended predatory for-profit colleges that have overall higher default rates for all students. Ashley Harrington, JD, Federal Advocacy Director and Senior Counsel at the Center for Responsible Lending, explained the catch-22 in which students of color often find themselves. The student debt crisis is absolutely a racial justice issue. For brown and Black folks, they often need to get more education to get the same salaries and positions that white folks can get with less education, and that means how do they do that? They have to take on more debt. The debt is then preventing wealth building. This is something that is impacting not just individuals, it's impacting their families, their communities. In August 2020, Roosevelt Institute study concluded while individual white borrowers at the medium stand to gain the most in absolute dollars from student debt cancellation, the relative gains for Black borrowers are much larger, and the greater proportion of Black borrowers means that Black wealth overall would experience more growth as a result. Given the many advantages wealth confers in the contemporary U.S. context, the substantial increase in Black net worth is a very significant positive contribution of student debt cancellation, one with potentially transformative positive impacts for Black families overall. The help provided by student loan debt forgiveness exceeds simple dollar amounts. And I think that kind of touches upon what was in the first pro-con. You know, if people are paying most of their money to pay off these student loan debts, they're not going to be able to open up their own businesses. They're not going to be able to make something for themselves because all their focus on is taking care of those debts. And with the problem that we have of major corporations like Amazon, like Starbucks, like your big box retailers, you know, in this country, like this pro is correct. If we forgive that student debt, people that are disadvantaged, just, you know, through nothing more than just where they were born and the color of their skin, they're going to be immediately helped. And I think that would also give give equity to everybody here, you know, because what we're looking at in this country right now is just, you know, more and more of these big companies becoming bigger, and just nothing could stop them from, you know, doing what they're doing. I mean, because we have a government that's neutered, you know,
yeah, well, I mean,
not willing to go after them.
You can't claim that you want more small businesses, that you want more Black businesses, that you want more women businesses, that you want more Latino businesses. The list probably goes on as far as who it seems statistically more difficult for them to succeed compared to the white male, right? And I'm not saying this necessarily to blame the white male for the fact that there is preferential treatment there. But the fact of the matter is that if you want more of businesses that are owned by those demographics that have a harder time succeeding, you need to support the idea of student loan forgiveness and potentially free college, which is closely adjacent to this conversation, right? Because what's the point of forgiveness if it's still going to be the debt generating monster that it is? And I did take a brief little second to look it up. So the average student loan debt in the United States, according, you know, to the Federal Reserve, is 32,000, almost 33,000. So it's not that much more than that dude talked. I mean, $10,000 is a lot for people who don't have a lot of money, though. So that even throws that into a little bit of perspective there. But yeah, like case in point, women also typically have to overprove themselves by a dedication to education in order to get the same pay. Usually it's not even the same pay. Well, I mean, maybe than a man that's got less of a degree, or somebody that's got a lesser degree or lesser education, right? So it would actually help stop a lot of that discrimination. Now, people can just go to college to the education level that they want to succeed in. But as you had mentioned with talking about the other pro and con, it's becoming super commonplace to see those requirements include bachelor's degrees. Now, that being said, that's a wish list item. I have taken more than one job that claimed I must have a bachelor's degree in accounting. And in the interview, I said, I do not have a bachelor's degree in accounting, but because I was able to kind of crawl my way up through creatively getting different little jobs and pitching my transferable skills, I was able to get jobs that required a degree without having one. I wish I had known that was a way to do that before I accrued tens of thousands of dollars of debt. I didn't need to do that. Most people don't need to do that. But yes, if we truly want to require these educational like minimums for jobs, then we need to start making college, or at least to a bachelor's level, free.
And there's another thing, too, that kind of ties into this in terms of another benefit of forgiving the student debt. And think about it, the military. You know, I mean, when you have people that are so desperate to get up out of their circumstances, but, you know, through no fault of their own, they, you know, have parents that may not have tons of cash, that may not be able to take out massive loans. A lot of people decide to go to the military to be able to hopefully get, get a leg up on education. Because, you know, last I heard, the military still offers to, you know, pay for college and stuff like that, you know, and think about the people that wouldn't necessarily have to choose that option, you know, especially with how our country loves to create little conflicts all over the world, you know?
Right. And like we act like that the idea of free public education has never been fought again. I challenge you to go back and read the history of how we actually got elementary through high school to be considered a public service, because that was not always the case. You used to have to pay for schooling for your child, and it used to be viewed kind of in the same way of con number 2 of, you know, it's something that you earn by being successful, the ability to send your kids to school. We've changed this once before. We can do it again. And I know we can. It's just, I think there's been a lot of like kind of gaslighty rhetoric out there that makes it sound like student loan forgiveness is some bougie thing, like almost the equivalent of how some people viewed the bank bailouts, that it's just going to reintroduce the problems later. And I know we're going to get into this with some of the other pros and cons as well, but like we need to stop acting like deciding that a certain education level being part of a public service for us is new, because it's not. We've challenged this before. We've won this before. And the fact of the matter is, if we want a more educated culture, it's time to increase it again, I think, is kind of where I'm getting at with this.
Indeed. Yeah. So let's dive into con number 2 here. Student loan debt forgiveness would disproportionately help rich or more financially secure college students. Konstantin Yanelis, PhD, professor of finance at the University of Chicago, found any policy that is a universal loan forgiveness policy or a capped forgiveness policy, say forgiving debt up to $50,000, is going to give most of the dollars in forgiveness to upper income individuals. Basically, most of the benefits will end up accruing to upper income individuals. As journalist Emma Ayers adds, students from families earning more than $114,000 a year borrow at the same rate as the lowest income students, and they take out loans nearly twice as large. Students with advanced degrees, lawyers, doctors, and others, account for 40% of all student debt, according to estimates by American Progress. And the top 25% of income-earning households hold almost half of student loan debt. Student forgiveness would largely be a hand up to the better off. Moreover, as Adam Looney, PhD, non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, pointed out, student loan forgiveness only benefits people who went to college. Imagine that. Yeah, I know.
Did you know bank bailouts only benefit the banks? I'm sorry. That was just I couldn't not put that comment in there. Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
All right. More than 90% of children from the highest income families have attended college by age 22 versus 35% from the lowest income families. Workers with bachelor's degrees earn about $500,000 more over the course of their careers than individuals with high school diplomas. That's why about 34% of all student debt is owed by borrowers in the top quartile of the income distribution, and only 12% owed by the bottom 25%. Indeed, the majority of all student debt is owed by borrowers with graduate degrees. People who borrowed for master's degrees and PhDs hold 56% of student loan debt, according to Brookings Institute estimates. Holding a master's or doctorate degree is also correlated to higher incomes. People with master's degrees earn about $2.7 million over a lifetime, more than twice what those with high school diplomas earn, $1.3 million. PhD holders earn $3.3 million more over a lifetime. Why should the federal government subsidize the incomes of people with high earning degrees? And I thought, why is this even an argument? Education is an investment. I don't care if some kid whose parents make over $200,000 a year goes to college to become a doctor himself, because if we forgive his debt, I mean, we've talked about it on the show before with medical thing. A lot of times doctors will choose a specific profession in the medical industry just because it pays more to pay off their student debt. You know, they're not, they're choosing to be like a plastic surgeon compared to maybe a general practitioner or something in a smaller town just because they have all of this debt to pay off. Imagine if that was gone and they didn't have to worry about that. That's not saying every doctor would suddenly stop, becoming plastic surgeons, but you get my point. If there was more financial freedom for these people, they're going to be able to do more.
Exactly. To me, this is another one of those con arguments that is kind of more talking points that benefit people who are really drinking capitalism Kool-Aid, and that capitalism is the best thing. It is the shit, is the best thing since sliced bread, Betty White, all of the stuff that we use in those statements. And I just don't agree with it. Like, first and foremost, let me point out that most people that go to college, right, are still probably people that have more income in their home, like in their family, right? So yeah, sure. I guess if you blank slate remove all of the debt, that yes, you'd be helping those families too, in an essence. Or how about this? How about instead of a cap of $50,000 of forgiveness, you put a cap on the income that you can extend forgiveness to for the loans that already exist, for example, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe as part of the need of or requirement for applying for loan forgiveness, you would have to have your family's finances looked at, because the fact of the matter is, like, these people that come from more well-off homes are more likely to have, like, oh, dad put in this money and invested in Apple and I get a monthly payout of da-da-da, which they can then use to pay those loans. Right? Like, a lot of these people don't even need to do income-driven plans, which we'll get into with the next pro-con set. But yeah.
Think about this too, though. In a weird way, this is kind of like taking the reverse angle of the previous con, and all it is classism. I mean, the first one was talking to people that had the financial ability to pay off their own student loans. It wants them to look down their nose at people that, were, taken advantage of by predatory loan people. And now this argument here is essentially telling poor people, you don't want to help those rich people out. Yes. They can take care of it themselves. When, again, this affects everybody. As I mentioned, if we forgive the student loan debt for the rich kid who is going to school to be a doctor or a lawyer, they're going to have a lot more that they can offer society as a whole, and I mean, that is just a fact.
Well, and the thing is, if canceling the debt that so many people got roped into doing, again, before their brain could even fully conceptualize what they were signing into, because I'm going to harp on that one. Mm-hmm. I'm okay with forgiving the debt of the rich families too. I actually don't view that as such a fucking negative that they want to make me believe that I should view as a negative. Because really, this talking point is not to the rich. This talking point is meant to convince those people who are poor, well, you don't want the rich folks to get this benefit because they're the rich and they're your enemy and you should only want this for you. And I'm like, no, if it's going to benefit our society, if it's going to increase our GDP by those billions of dollars every year, fuck it. Let's do it. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Bail out the rich kids too. I really don't give a shit. I don't understand why this has worked so long to keep in, really, I would say, the poorer demographic that tend to be on Team Red. Because it amazes me how much that demographic gets spoken to, where they manage to convince them that, oh, we're going to help you make the rich pay more, when really, like, most of the policies they end up enacting on the far Team Red side benefit the wealthier and don't necessarily actually benefit small businesses, small business owners, small business creation. They say they want these things, but their actions go directly against that. And this talking point is just, to me, almost gaslighty towards their poorer demographic of why you should still support us, even though here I am, part of the 1%, talking down to you, telling you that you don't want me to have these benefits. Like, that just stinks of manipulation when you look at it that way.
Yeah, and we've talked about this on the show before, but there's a great documentary on Hulu called Hillbilly that kind of goes into how the Republicans have been speaking to people in the South and how Democrats have failed, exponentially failed, so horribly wrong in terms of outreach when really, I think, if the Democrats made a little bit of an effort, I think we would have a lot more different results in this country.
Well, and also it's just that I don't think that they understand that demographic as much as they desperately want to. And now at this point, they're facing intergenerational confirmation bias and intergenerational anchoring bias. And that's going to get harder and harder to fight, especially as long as the demographic that's holding the talking points over them and has their attention continues to encourage them to be undereducated, to not be able to be smart. It goes back to kind of that meme, which, I'll probably end up sharing that next week because it was such a good find that I stumbled across. But it kind of speaks to that narrative, is the people who are telling you you don't want this, you don't want loan forgiveness, literally are the ones benefiting most by a lot of their demographic being undereducated and by not extending loan forgiveness and by not supporting free college.
Which kind of ties into our next pro-con, so dive into it.
Let's do this. Pro number 3, student loan debt has infantilized a generation or more of Americans, preventing them from achieving milestones such as getting married, buying a house, or saving for retirement. Discharging such debt would help foster a healthier, more productive, more socially constructive citizenry. For women with bachelor's degrees, each increase in 1,000 of student loan debt decreased the odds of marriage by 2% per month in the 4 years after graduation. Student loan debt prevented about 400,000 people from buying homes between 2005 and 2014. Which accounted for 25% of the decrease in home ownership. So again, it's not fucking Starbucks. Anyway, that point just got brought up recently, so I think I'm triggered by it. Every $1,000 increase in student loan debt lowered the home ownership rate by 1.5% for those who attended four-year colleges. Further, student loan debtors save half as much for retirement by age 30 as those without debt. In August 2020, Roosevelt Institute study explained, quote, the positive effects of an evidence-based student debt cancellation policy for individuals and households extend far beyond the immediate need of removing burdensome debt. The ramifications for financial and personal well-being, credit, job stability and satisfaction, home ownership earlier in life course, capacity to build wealth for emergencies, human capital investments, family stability, and accumulating wealth can multiply throughout a person's life. Choosing to go to college to compete in a job market shouldn't prevent people from living the American dream. And basically, that's the point of this pro, is that is what it is doing. I already mentioned at the top of this, I've experienced 2 of those blocks because of my wanting to go back to school, to wanting to stay in school because I was told I needed to. I was told I must do it right out of high school because if you don't do it right out of high school, you're less likely to do it. I wonder why that is. Is it because maybe if you stall and you keep going and you wait, or maybe you've got parents that can explain, like, we don't have the income to pay this off, right? Not all of us have that blessing that is parents that actually will look out for you in that sense. A lot of parents have the narrative of, nope, your child's 18, they need to get the fuck out of your home. And I think that also goes into this a little bit there. But yeah, it stopped me from getting a job. It caused me to have to drop my name from my husband and I applying for a home loan because we had more buying power without my college debt on there, which is absolutely fucking insane when you think about that. So yeah, I guess to me, because it's come up so recently of like, you know, shaming people for their Starbucks is part of the honest to shit reason that they think we're not buying houses. And it has nothing to fucking do with that. It's really a large part of this stuff.
And look at the housing market, like Professor Aubrey, you know, like we've talked about her on the show. She's been on the show. She's a professor. She's a lawyer. And yet with the housing market in Portland being what it is, she was lucky to buy a condo, which, you know, like 20 years ago would have been insane. She would have been able to buy like a, you know, like a 4-bedroom house or something like that with, you know, the credit that she had. So it is just sad that people aren't seeing the bigger picture here. It's like the arguments of, you know, this could affect your pocketbook are blinding people to the overall benefits. And think about it too. Like, are you really saying all people going to college are lazy? Are you, you know, that they're just looking for a free ride, that they're looking to get through college and then afterwards go back to their parents' house and chill in the basement? No, people go to college because they want something better out of their lives. And yet, if we're trapping them with this insurmountable debt, are we really doing that? No, we're just keeping them stuck in the system here, and in a system that is just clearly benefiting the absolute rich and the biggest corporations, because, you know, the big corporations don't want a little one kind of growing, you know?
Right. And it's like, I think we want to act like that, like the amount of people who have gone to school in the last 10, 20 years hasn't increased, right? So looking really quick, in 1995, the total federal student loan balance was only $187 billion, or 11.5% of the current balance. Between 1995 and 2022, the total federal student loan debt balance increased by 766.3%. That's a lot. And I think a lot of that probably could be contributed to the fact that they started marketing more of, no, even though you don't have money and your family doesn't have money, you can still go to college and then you can make money and then you can have all of the money and then you can take care. Because that was very much the talking points that I got back in the early aughts. I graduated in 2003. So keep in mind, I have been accruing debt for damn near 2 decades now. Like, I started that journey in 2003.
Think about what happened after 95, though. The for-profit colleges, you know, had a big boom after that, you know, like your University of Phoenix's, ITG Technical Institute, you know, those strictly done for-profit schools that are just absolute garbage. I mean, I attended University of Phoenix in 2010 for 1 semester, and like I was so glad I only stuck with it that 1 semester. Like, the whole idea of making it to where all of your schoolwork is done with a group of people, that because that's their big thing. They have their students learning in groups, and if the rest of the people in the group don't do the homework, but you do and you turn it in, everybody still gets that A, which is bullshit. And then how much it cost, you know, something like people are, the University of Phoenix people, when I went there, you know, they were bad mouthing like community colleges, when for most people in my tax bracket, a community college should probably be the first place you go. You know, get rid of all the core stuff you can for as cheap as you can, and then move on to something bigger at a bigger school if you want to go that route. Some people are cool with an associate's degree, you know, but Wow. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's even gotten to the point, like talking about job requirements and things, where I've noticed that at least associate degrees have even been required. So I could even see it's been something that's been argued for even longer, is that at least community college through that associate degree should be free. That should be like the next thing. Like, we fought for elementary school, then we fought for more like middle school, high school, like in earlier centuries. I think it's been a long time that we should have already included community college and up to the associate's degree considered in standard education. So in essence, I feel like we're behind, and that now we're at a point where it should be pretty much free college at this point. But going into con number 3, discharging student loan debt would only be a temporary bandage for the much larger problem of inflated college costs. The U.S. already has several student loan forgiveness programs, and yet we're still in student loan debt crisis. I love how they think that's actually a point for their point and not a counterpoint for them, but we'll get into that in a minute. People who work in public service jobs can have their loans forgiven after 120 loan payments. Some teachers can have up to $17,500 forgiveness after 5 years of teaching, which isn't that much. Nurses can have up to 60% of nursing education loans forgiven, followed by another 25% later. Income-driven repayment, IDR, are available that allow loans to be forgiven after 25 years of income-based payments. Military members can save up to 100% of their loans forgiven, or can have up to 100% of their loans forgiven. Medical doctors and lawyers have multiple options for forgiveness. AmeriCorps service members can have 100% of their loans forgiven. Betsy Mayonette, president and founder of the Institution of Student Loan Advisors, noted, "To me, the free or debt-free college professionals hold more weight than loan forgiveness, as they address the illness itself rather than just the symptoms. Don't get me wrong, if we could find a way to do both, we should, but reducing the debt consumers have to take out in the first place would be the thing that would have the longer-lasting benefit to the economy. The U.S. needs a solution to outsized college costs that cause students to take out loans in the first place, rather than a temporary solution that does nothing to prevent the next generation from accruing similar debt." Now, I did not go into why college has gone up. My almost reactionary, totally speculative, is that if you want teachers to be able to afford the higher degree that they require to teach in college, only $17,000 in debt forgiveness is not enough for that. So they probably have to pay more, right? So this is actually, I think that feeds into each other a little bit. But oddly, I don't understand how student loan forgiveness and then even folding into free college for all wouldn't in effect fix this, because then those colleges would have to operate at a certain budget, because it would be like how high schools and stuff like that do, which is not a perfect system, granted. But this is also a lot of the narrative they need to keep free college off the table, right? It's kind of like they don't want free public health care. So the VA health system gets shit on all the time, but yet they're also having resources pulled from them, right? So I think that's a weird correlation here.
And it wasn't that long ago. I know in the 60s, at least, Robert Reich, who I think is a professor at Stanford, used to be a member of the Clinton administration, mentioned that schools in California, if you lived in that state, colleges used to be free. And it was, and then after the 60s, then they started enacting like tuition and whatnot. So it has been done before. It can be done again.
Yeah, but I guess I wanted to more go into the problem with, we already have income-driven repayment, right? Which is something that they are trying to address with some of the changes, and that I was personally excited about. One of the Biden administration changes that I had seen is they're actually going to make it where there is only one IDR, and that's what I'm going to go into. So I actually found from brookings.edu that they had done a little bit of a study and looking at things back in just March of 2022. So this is a fairly recent article, and it's called Income-Driven Repayment of Student Loans, Problems and Options for Addressing Them. I'm going to go through these really quick as I can because they did get a little bit wordier than I wanted to get into. But basically, they say few borrowers have historically used IDR, including some who would likely have qualified for reduced payments and eventual forgiveness. Many borrowers never learn about IDR, and while federal loan contracts with servicers have improved, IDR is bureaucratically challenging, and servicers have not always had incentives to enroll borrowers in IDR programs. Also, borrowers who enroll in IDR plans often fail to remain in them, many because they fail to recertify each year as currently required. U.S. Department of Education data from 2013 to 2014 show that more than half of borrowers in IDR plans did not recertify on time. For some borrowers, this might be intentional. Perhaps they find a higher paying job and or wish to avoid interest costs by paying their loan faster. Many borrowers fail to recertify because of inattention or because of the bureaucracy of it, technical difficulties or legal difficulties recertifying. For many borrowers, this leads to an increase in required payments, sometimes an increase in the automatic debits from a borrower's bank account, capitalization of unpaid interest that increases total debt, and delays in payments that extend the life of the loan. I've actually experienced that. I had the sticker shock of, holy shit, and they took more than doubled. Like, I want to say the payment was triple. It totally fucked me for like a few months. But granted, yeah, that one is a little bit more on me, right? Like I in that whole responsibility thing, I do at least kind of understand this, even though I still, when that happened, I was not even 25 yet. Because remember, college doesn't last. Like, you're still in that age of your brain developing, like the whole while that you're in college for the most part.
Right.
So the first time it happened was total shocker. I did get my shit together. I started putting, and they've even gotten better about informing you now, like if you actually go in and log in and stuff, but it can be very shocking. The next point, many borrowers find their IDR payment unaffordable. The current formula protects a borrower's income up to 150% of the federal poverty level and sets monthly payments at up to 10% of, quote, discretionary income above that level. The formula for setting IDR monthly payments reflect income and family size, but not regional differences in the cost of living and other expenses a borrower may have. Because individuals file taxes based on prior year income, the federal government has no real-time measure of income or employment, so payments are based on last year's income. If a borrower falls on hard times, for example, by losing a job, it falls on the borrower to update their income. Several of the recommendations for the prior problem have also been proposed to address affordability. 2 more points on this, and then we can move on. No matter how well intended IDR is, its success depends on how well it is administered. Borrowers generally deal not directly with the federal government, but with servicers that are hired by the government to deal with borrowers. Servicing errors and abuses, along with Department of Education policies, often prevent borrowers from accessing all of the benefits of IDR. For example, lost paperwork can result in delays in IDR processing and a loss of qualifying payments towards cancellation. And so this one, I actually want to bring this one up specifically because I've been a victim of this. So what's interesting is because there were multiple IDR programs, whether intentional or not, whether they were actually looking out for what was good for you, if you didn't know that switching IDR programs starts the 20-year clock over on forgiveness, you signed up and changed programs and fucked yourself out of your forgiveness timeline.
Oh.
And so that is something that I do feel is finally being addressed with some of the Biden administration changes. Now there's only going to be one. We'll see how that goes. But the fact of the matter is there have been some things with those programs that have actually hurt people's ability to get that long-term forgiveness down the road. And then the last little point they make, many borrowers in IDR do not make payments large enough to cover the accruing interest, so they see their balances grow over time. Even though their balances may eventually be forgiven, rising balances are, to say the least, discouraging to borrowers who are making required monthly payments and can mar borrowers' credit reports. In contrast, borrowers in fixed payment plans see their balances fall over time. In certain repayment plans, the government subsidizes the interest to reduce or eliminate this problem. For instance, for qualifying loans under repay, which is different than IDR. See what they did there? They've even slipped in one of the other names. The government pays 100% of the interest for the first 36 payments in which a borrower's payments don't cover the interest, and then the government subsidizes 50% of interest on any subsequent payment. So yeah, there's a lot of problems with IDR, and while we are starting to address them, the fact that this con is really saying we already have a program for this, to me, is not good enough. Yeah, sure, you can get the rest of it forgiven after 20, 25 years, but my God, so if you're graduating college in your 20s, you have to wait until you're 45 to get rid of that debt. So it's still putting that lag in ability to buy a home.
And think about teachers, like a grade school teacher earning less than somebody that works at a big box retailer. They're not going to have money. I mean, if the teacher has to go to Amazon to create wish lists to get all the supplies they need for their students anyway, they're going to be financially unable to start a family, to buy a house, to be a tax-paying member of society. I mean, you would think, again, you would want to support helping them out, because if a teacher's able to buy a house, they're paying more taxes. That helps the government,
Right. And I think it's funny that, so what they did was they said, well, we already have this IDR program. All right, well, there's all the holes in that. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing they want to blame it on is college increasing tuition. But that's what capitalistic attitude is going to do towards any industry. They're going to increase the cost. It's the same issues that I think we kind of brought up when we talked about Medicare for all and stuff like that in the health episode. But so that being said, I have even experienced that. I got sat down by a college financial advisor, and I was encouraged to move off campus and take out extra in student loans to pay my rent for the year. So there are some shady practices. And again, at this point, this was not me going back to college in my later 20s and 30s. This was me before that age of 25, before my brain even had a chance to fully understand what this adult-ass college counselor was telling me to do. Yeah. And all because, why was that? Oh, they needed more dorm rooms because they were running low on dorm rooms for the year prior. So they were trying to help talk students into moving off of campus. So they did not care about what I needed. They worked in the interest of their business, which is kind of what you do in those situations. And even then, increasing cost of the college actually could be a way of trying to control how many people they're getting on their campus if they're facing issues like running out of room.
Yeah. Anyway, should we dive into the next pro-con here?
Yes, let's get into our final pro-con. There were only 4 on this one, so we can keep it a tight 4.
Yeah, I mean, because if I think about that some more, I'm just going to get mad. Anyway.
Right? Like, it just really seems like the whole system is built to kind of fuck over people who would need the IDR system.
Yeah, I mean, you would think having a program like the IDR program in place, it sounds like the intention is to hopefully help people out so they don't have to pay the full amount of their loans. Because on the one hand, I get it. Yeah, if you do take out some loans, you should pay them off. But again, this is school. This is not buying a Lamborghini. Yep. This.
And also those loan servicers are not part of the federal government. They are, but when it comes down to it, for-profit agencies that are going to make for-profit decisions. And that's going to include maybe not traditionally being open about forgiveness plans, because
it doesn't benefit them. It's set it in what you just said.
Why would it benefit them? Because I would think that, I mean, I don't know exactly how they make their money, but I would assume the more of your debt that you pay, the more money they're going to get somehow and in some way.
Yeah. All right. The next pro here, denying student loan debtors the benefits of bankruptcy, benefits that all other debtors have access to, is unfair. The U.S. Supreme Court said in 1915 that the benefits of bankruptcy allow debtors to start afresh, free from the obligations and responsibilities. Famous business leaders from Henry Ford to the Mango Mussolini have used bankruptcy for a fresh start. Car loans, credit card charges, medical bills, and even gambling debts can be discharged in bankruptcy. Not allowing educational debt to be discharged is unfair. Mark Hulsman, senior policy analyst at Demos, wrote, "In a world where most students must borrow for a credential, borrowers should receive the same fail-safe protections on these loans as they do on any other consumer loan. Students who didn't understand the consequences of taking out big loans at age 18 or who were misled about future job prospects can be saddled with six-figure debt for decades." And I mean, that is important there. I mean, the fact that, you couldn't get it, do a bankruptcy because like in 2010, my University of Phoenix adventure, ended up resulting in, having to pay back some loans, and they ultimately took that out of my federal return.
Oh yes, that's something I've had hit me before too. But yeah, like I remember so I know at some point when you're in college or they started making it so you had to have student loan counseling, and that meant somebody actually talked to you about this stuff. As if taking it in a different format is going to magically make my less than 25-year-old brain understand the long-term consequences. I remember somebody saying, it's like, well, you can't write this off on bankruptcy. Bankruptcy won't ever clear this. And I was like, okay. Like, I didn't even know what the fuck that meant at the time that they were explaining it to me. It's like, all right, side note, what's bankruptcy? I don't know what that means. Doesn't that mean that you're out of money? Like, I didn't know that was something at the time that you actually applied for. Like back when this was being fucking explained to me as a kid.
Yes. And I mean, it's the system in place as it stands without allowing people to use bankruptcy as a way to get out of student loans is just a way to keep people in their place. It really is. Nothing more, nothing less, because as I think we've shown through, talking out these points that, people going to school have different logic than somebody buying a car. This is not a matter of somebody spending recklessly. It's about somebody investing in their future and expecting something back from it, and think of that. What do they call it? The quiet quitting that they've talked about on the news recently, where people are just doing their responsibilities and nothing more. I mean, all that is people finally waking up to the fact that you're not going to get ahead in big business. So if this system is in place where people can't, do a bankruptcy for extreme student loan debts, why would anybody be encouraged to want to go to college after that fact?
Right. And I think it's funny that, you can get to the point of what they even pointed out when you compare some of these things next to each other, as far as what society should maybe back for forgiveness. I love that you can get gambling debt taken care of when that is obviously something that happens over 18. That's something that can happen a lot more, especially if you've gotten that addictive personality behind it and maybe actually need some help, not just for it to be forgiven. When you compare gambling debts, credit card charges, again, that's another thing that can get out of control as an effect of struggling with anxiety, depression, CPTSD, a lot, actually bipolar disorder. Like they'll do the same thing. They'll just manically spend. So, but that's easier to kind of view as ungood behavior, right? That's bad. You've got a gambling problem. You've got a spending problem, right? Even if you want to totally gut it and take away the mental health conversation behind why people would do those things, we're really saying that we're going to forgive those at the equal level of medical bills, but not student loan debt. Wait, at least like whenever you're going into debt with student loan, you're actually trying to get education, which is better for society. What the fuck did gambling ever earn society? Overspending can even kind of have its argument for being good for society in a sense, because you are giving business, and that might even be to small businesses. But I think it's really funny to me that we'll forgive gambling debt, but this one is never on the table. It is not to be considered. They want you to understand from the beginning, you are going to owe this. If we got to put your thumb in screws to like make you understand that you're going to owe this, we're going to sit down and explain it to you like you're 5, even though your brain's still not going to process it any differently than you trying to read it before.
And that kind of does tie into the last con here, so I'll go into that right now. Student loan discharge via bankruptcy would allow borrowers to abuse the loan system and encourage colleges to increase tuition. Making it easier to discharge loans would give people an incentive to take out loans with no intention of paying them back or to borrow more than they need, which in turn could cause them to seek bankruptcy without fully realizing the negative long-term consequences on their credit scores or in other aspects of their lives, but they don't think of that argument when they're talking to a 17-year-old to sign these loans. New college graduates rarely have significant assets to surrender in bankruptcy, so they have less incentive to avoid bankruptcy. Student debt elimination through bankruptcy would encourage increased borrowing, and more borrowing leads to higher tuition. Abigail Hall Blanco, PhD, assistant professor of economics at the University of Tampa, said loan forgiveness would be one giant subsidy, creating perverse incentives for both schools and students. If schools knew the government would forgive the cost of their students' education, they face no incentive to cut costs to keep tuition down. And, tuition is another argument for another day as to, the cost of tuition for the colleges that you go to. But I love how they just treat people going to college like a gambler.
Or like we just made some kind of stupid fucking decision. And by the way, they want to sit there and it's like, oh, well, you don't understand the long-term consequences of bankruptcy, and like that you shouldn't want to do that. Quick math. How long does bankruptcy stay on your record?
7 years, I believe.
Yep, 7 to 10 years. And now, how long was that again? For student loan forgiveness? 20 to 25 years. So let's just compare those two numbers and call bullshit, because that is what is going to stop people, right? Bankruptcy, you can't take out new lines of credit. You're probably not going to get approved for home loans, etc. But you're also not going to get those things if you have a large college debt on you for 20 to 25 years after you're done accruing it. Like, that's not even a stop, like, right at the beginning of you starting the debt. Like, that's after, and that's if you've been successful in those payments, if you haven't already been talked into some of the, like, switching repayment plans, which can negatively affect those things. And those are things that we're hoping get fixed with this, right? The predatory nature and the kind of the fact that these loan servicers are businesses and want to make money is now hopefully going to be addressed. But the thing is that it hasn't been.
And think about bankruptcy. I mean, they're making bankruptcy sound like a be-all, end-all solution to where you're able to just do it whenever you want. They make it sound like it's just an option for everybody when it's really not. I know George Bush in the 2000s enacted some changes in bankruptcy, making it harder for people to go bankrupt. And to your point, if you do declare bankruptcy, it's not a wipe the slate clean thing. You still have a set of time to where, you can't take out more loans, you can't get a house, you can't do whatever, but it's meant to, as the Supreme Court said, to get a point to where after that time period of 7 to 10 years, you're able to start anew, and what? I mean, like, somebody's going to go to college and get a degree in something, declare bankruptcy, and then go back and get another degree. Come on. Does that make any sort of sense? Just, I'm going to keep on getting degrees and not pay for them. What are you going to do?
I think it's hilarious how we really want to convince people that the majority of humans are the ones that are going to try to, like, hustle and take advantage of stuff, when most people do kind of want to live an honest life. And what's even funnier about this is, like, they're sitting there saying that, loan forgiveness would be one giant subsidy, and, like, how schools would even take advantage of this governmental forgiveness. And I'm like, but isn't this why the larger conversation should be towards moving closer to, free college? And that's not to say, like, there's still going to be private universities. Don't worry, 1%. You'll still be able to probably do your shit where it's like, well, we're different because we paid and went to this school. I think that's still going to exist to some level, just the same as some private practitioners are still going to exist to some level if we ever really did move to universal health care. So I think it's funny that they're like, oh, well, what'll we do? Because this will just incentivize schools to still be expensive. And it's like, well, you could step in and handle this larger conversation of how education really is a benefit for societal good, and that maybe we should be working towards making it more accessible to more people by having places that they can go for education and get that, even though it might not be like the pinky up colleges that might still remain privatized in some way or form. I really don't see us ever super getting rid of the classism that's going to be available in our culture, but there still are ways to provide education to help benefit our culture and our society that, you know, it's absolutely ridiculous how they seem to really want to point blame on everybody else, whether it is the child's irresponsible decision or the colleges increasing their tuition, right?
Yeah. At the end of the day here, I mean, in summation, I think what we've discovered here is that the education system in this country is fucked in a lot of ways. The fact that people going to school to better their lives, to be better citizens in this country, are being penalized for that. It makes no sense, and it's a problem that if we do not address it now, is just going to make it so much worse. And we have a history in this country of not wanting to take care of problems until it blows up in our face. And we can't financially do that when it comes to this, because think of how many people are going to college, and just education has to be treated for what it is. It is an investment. A person successfully going from kindergarten to graduating through college is going to be better, is going to be more likely to be a better contributing part of society than not. And the fact that we have so much in place that makes it hard for the average person who doesn't have a lot of cash to be able to better themselves just really sucks. And I think, on my part, it's like one of those things that you want to do what you can to fight to make sure to make a change. And I think the important thing here is voting for politicians that actually want to make some significant positive changes on this, and not just talk a good game and then ultimately do nothing like the Democratic Party.
Well, I mean, I guess that's what's really interesting about this particular pro-con going through it with you, is I think this is the first time. And I mean, I know I'm speaking kind of an absolute here, but I think it's true. Like, there's not a lot of actual fact or study being presented on the con side. It's a lot of talking points, it's a lot of speculation, and it's a lot of blame. Whereas normally I find when we go through these conversations that there is something that makes me pause and think. But wow, this one really did not give me that at all. So, I mean, I don't think my opinion on student loan forgiveness has changed an iota, but I do think my support of free college has definitely been bumped. I haven't thought too much about it, other than I have kind of agreed with, associate's degrees, because they are being required more for even places like at Walmart. They want to require this now. Require, and I'll still throw that in quotes, because keep in mind it is a wish list ultimately when you see those things listed on a job. But yeah, I gotta say I'm becoming more of an advocate of there should be some form of free college. Look at our education system, even K through high school, we've still managed to keep a private level. Where people, if they've got money and they want to have their special oh my God, they came from this boarding school. They have that ability to do that. I don't see why we would ever need to take that away. I do think that we should be providing education at a core to everybody. It benefits society. I don't want the person who can cure HIV, cure cancer, cure these things that plague us sometimes to not do it because of any of the cons listed here. None of these cons to me outweigh the ability of a person who could potentially really help, could stop global warming, the type of people who figure out that mushrooms can eat plastic or whatever. I don't think they should be stopped from benefiting our world because of anything listed in any of these cons. None of them are good enough for me.
Yeah, I mean, because again, going to school is not like an 18-year-old going out trying to buy a Lamborghini. Are there irresponsible people on this planet? Of course there are, and irresponsible people should have to deal with the consequences of their actions. I'm not arguing against that, but education is an investment. I mean, that is just a fact.
Yep.
You
And the
know,
last
and
little
yeah.
point. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, I
No,
thought
go
you were
ahead.
finishing. Okay. Yeah, kind of to that point though, is like this whole idea that somebody needs to pay for this consequence. Well, you've basically victimized a child and said it's their fault that it worked on them for their brain not being developed enough to understand what you were selling them.
Yeah.
So to me, that is still the most glaring thing, is the fact that these are kids that are being talked into this debt. So even if you ignore like the free college argument, like totally toss that out and only talk about excusing the debt that has been accrued up through these predatory practices. So like if you opened a student loan before the age of 25, okay, maybe anything that was open and any interest that accrued on anything that was open before the age of 25 get written off. Fine. I actually recognize that I accrued debt after 25, and I would be totally fine with continuing to pay that because it would be so significantly less than the total. So, yeah, like, can we at least recognize that this was really predatory and shit behavior to put on kids right outside of high school? And that maybe they're not the ones that should be paying that consequence. Maybe it's the people who gave them the money that should be paying that consequence.
Indeed. And also just don't fall for these emotional arguments that people, I mean, because that's what the cons were, you know, what about this? What about the, you know, please study this, because the more we help our students, I think the quicker we'll have an economic turnaround. I mean, people will have more money to spend. Imagine that.
Oh, and our GDP would go up. Don't forget, that was a very, they looked at it and did their best with playing, right? Because really any of those, like, it would go up is storytelling world. They're doing their best with information formulas, understanding of how GDP is calculated and effects in the economy, like people who actually get educated in economical, like understanding that level of everything. They're saying like this could really improve that end too. So wait a second, if this is going to improve people's abilities to buy homes, it's going to help our GDP, and it's going to, I mean, there's just a lot of benefit to the actual act of student loan forgiveness. Even if you're like, nope, free college, totally not in the cards. But the student loan forgiveness argument, I think it's pretty clear that we should be taking this more seriously as a culture.
And I mean, also too, I mean, we mentioned it at the top of the show, think about babies. If someone is financially in a spot to where they're paying most of their money off in student loan debt, they're not going to, you know, I mean, accidents happen, of course. I can say that from experience, but they're not going to want to have a baby because, again, financially, you want to, as a parent, be able to take care of it. You know, I mean, people that are choosing not to have babies because they have student loan debts should be commended. You know, for you know, that's another thing that shows they're responsible. But if you want more babies, maybe help them out. You know, but
more babies, more small business. We can have a lot more good things, I think, if we'd be open to supporting this on both sides.
Indeed. Well, speaking of babies, our baby is 5 years old today.
Yes, it is. Friends talking nerdy.
I can't believe. It's like, on the one hand, when you start something like this, you hope that it goes and goes and goes. But on the other hand, the fact that it has reached 5 years is like, I can't believe it. You know?
Oh, same. And I can't even, like, I think I've been involved regularly, for the past 3? Is that right? 2?
2, I would say, yeah.
2, okay. So yeah. 2 for sure. See, I'm not going to go off of my timeline. It's fucked. I've already mentioned that a few times. Like, yeah, we sure did talk about this at some point, and then it happened, but I wasn't involved for a little while. And that's fine, because that's just how life worked out. But I know I've really loved being involved in it, especially when I became a more regular part. Super exciting and awesome, and I enjoy it. I look forward to recordings. And I know recently I've gotten over my disdain of listening to myself, so I can actually like hear how I'm talking and try to be better at this for Tim, for the podcast, and for our listeners. So, and to you guys who have been listening to us continually, thank you so much for your support. It really does. Like, we notice, you know, we look at those demographics of our downloads and our listens, and it's good to know that you guys are out there.
Indeed, I agree with that sentiment there. And we've had a number of people that have spent some time contributing to the show over the years as well. It's a lot of people. I'm not going to go through every single name here because I know probably a couple of them probably don't want me talking about them. That's a different story. But I mean, like the original crew, that was there at the beginning of the show's run. Kind of helped set the stage. Then later on, like Kim the Geek was great in terms of, it helping me get the show back up and running during a pretty dark period in my life that I've talked about on the show here. Professor Aubrey, of course. But our baby, the show, like, yeah, like the fact, like, I think back. And that's another thing too. Like last week, like you revealed for the first time that on the show that we dated, and you didn't even talk about me being super awkward the first couple times. You had some stories. Like the second, like I'll say here, the second date, like when we walked along the waterfront, by my work during my lunch hour. There, do you remember that ice cream guy?
Oh,
the guy,
no.
The guy was. Yeah, the guy was like selling ice creams and whatnot. And we ended up buying one, but he was a vendor and was like, "Let me take your picture." And then like you put your arm around me, and my arms were like strictly to my sides. And then like later that day, you texted me and were like, "You do know generally when a woman puts her arm around you, it's okay for you to put your arm around her."
I totally remember this now. Oh my God, that was so funny. I wonder if we can find that picture.
Oh, I don't have it. I mean, one little the pictures I had from that era, unfortunately, when I was angry, I got rid of.
Oh, that's fine. I'm not even talking about I might have it.
Mm.
Because if I had it, I tend to share a lot. And plus, there's like the beauty of Google Photos, where if you don't go in there and get rid of it in Google Photos, it'll still be there. So I'm wondering, I might try to see if I can dig and find that one. And if not there, it might even be in our old Facebook chats. So who knows?
No, well, I mean, if you got it, I would love to see it again. Because like I said, I don't have pictures. I just have memories. But like, I know I told you before that, our talks when we first started talking about the show, meant a lot in terms of how the show built up. And yeah, I mean, we didn't sit back and, come up with like a 5-year definitive plan or anything like that. But I mean, it was like I was telling you yesterday, I think ultimately what I've gone for in terms of tone, in terms of feel for what the show is doing good. It's like, to me, I want the show to feel like I feel when I talk to you just every day,
Aw, shucks.
Yeah. Just the vibe that I get from that. So like, you've been very important to me. And I'm glad that, we get to do this each and every week. And, as a creative person as well, like that's another thing that I've always appreciated about you. The fact that, when we are together, like we have this thing to where we just are constantly focusing on creating, on doing stuff on, and whether that be show related stuff. I mean, the memes that you've been putting out lately have been amazing. So thank you for that. But also non-show related stuff. Like look at last year with the Haunt, like you were talking to me about Haunt stuff all the time. Even if just talking to me was allowing you to vent, we were still engaged in the creative process. You've, read some of my writing and whatnot. And whatnot. So I'm glad that we've done this for as long as we have. I hope this continues to go. And who knows? I mean, maybe there comes a day where Friends Talking Nerdy itself isn't a thing anymore, but I hope we're still creating, and I hope we're, still doing what we're doing here. And thank you. And I'm very excited about what the future holds because we have a lot of surprises.
Yes, I agree with all of those sentiments and so much more. And I know our relationship, our friendship has not always been easy. And I'm not going to claim any level of perfectionism on how I dealt with that. There was a point that you got what I still think was like one of my more asshole texts I've ever sent. and it was a novel. I secretly hoped you didn't actually read it all, but knowing you probably did, and probably more than once, which makes me feel horrible when I think about it. Especially now, like I felt totally validated and justified then, right? But when you unpack things later, you kind of realize, and that's where it's like I always liked having an attitude of being open to like people changing and growing, or even going back to a better version of themselves after you're no longer in that situation. And I'm glad that I've got that attitude, because otherwise I don't think we would have ever come together to make what we've been making. I know it's changed a lot. You know, you've posted the first episode, and even probably the first episode where I was involved. And even within just the last few months, I feel like it's changed. But overall, I think it's changed into a really great thing. It's become a really great outlet. You know, for a while there, I was talking about doing my own spin-off podcast, but the more I thought about it, the less I feel the need for it. You know, we kind of do this really cool thing where we try to address, you know, not just the cool social narrative that I like to kind of comment on from time to time that gets me into so much trouble sometimes on Facebook public posts. But, you know, I like being able to have these conversations because I think it makes me a better human. It does make me think about the things that I believe. And so I love how much this show and talking to you has made me grow more, because I don't think I ever want to stop growing, because our access to information and things we understand in our world and psychology and economics and politics is going to change constantly. So if I'm not constantly challenging those views, I am doing a disservice to myself. And this show has really been a great venue for me to challenge my own views with a friend who I know is not going to take anything I say to a judgmental level. Like, I know you're going to try to understand what I mean and help me clarify what I mean. And that's an awesome creative partnership to have.
Indeed. Indeed. Like, I couldn't ask for anything more in a creative partner, honestly. You know, like, John Lennon remembered when he met Paul McCartney. Trey Parker, I'm sure, remembered when he met Matt Stone. And I'm always going to remember when I first met you, because, like, you know, the friendship I have with you, just, you know, you're a special person. And for what we've created here on the show and what the future holds for this show, like, I'm excited. I'm really excited.
Can you call my dad and tell him that? Sorry. I can't get too serious, guys. I can't have proof that I have emotions on this show. But but yes, it's been a great journey, and I look forward to however it continues.
Indeed, indeed. Now, before we wrap up, talk about Fearlandia one more time after you cough. Maybe it's not wise to make a person laugh when they're coughing.
Oh, right. Sorry. I had to have a little bit of a cough. It made a little delay in response there, guys. But yeah, so Fearlandia one more time. If you're interested in haunt work, even if you're interested in kind of a level of behind the scenes where you can be in a point of empowerment and possibly even face fears of places like haunted houses by being in that empowered place, please feel free to submit an application. Again, fearlandia.com. If you want to, you can even click on that, go to our Facebook, and there is a job posting on there.
Indeed, and you will find that link in our show description here. You know, I only attended Fearlandia as a customer, but it's something you will definitely enjoy.
Yes, there's been a lot of enjoyment from our patrons, and even the small kids that I have mama birded through coming through at the end and later becoming a fan.
Well, I think that will wrap things up for us this week then. So thank you all for 5+ years now of listening to Friends Talking Nerdy. Each Saturday, we will have something in this podcast space to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
Happy birthday to us.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.